mental health is a really difficult issue for startup founders. The stress, the uncertainty, the loneliness, it's not often talked about and is considered very taboo. I'm excited today to speak with Janos Barberis, the founder of SuperCharger EdTech Accelerator and also the founder of Founders Taboo, an organization that works with founders to give them an outlet and community to learn about mental health issues. Janos, welcome to the show. Thanks everyone for tuning into this episode of A Founder's Life. I'm really happy to have Janos Barberis on the show today. Janos is the founder of SuperCharger, a EdTech accelerator and fund, and he's also the founder of Founders Taboo. Janos, welcome to the show.
Victor, happy to see you again, even though virtually. It's really a pleasure to have you here, and looking forward for what's ahead of us today.
Yeah, thank you. And I've known you for a few years now. When SuperCharger was a fintech accelerator in Asia. Just to start off with, I'd love to hear a little bit more about yourself and your journey with SuperCharger and how that's been going and how it's ended. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you were saying, the way we got to meet each other was because of our fintech past and experience. About 7 years ago, so I think in 2015, I decided to go to Asia. I was based in London. I was doing one of the first challenger bank, and I really genuinely believed about the fintech opportunity in Asia. Everyone was looking at Europe and the US. Very few people were looking east, and I thought, let's go in Hong Kong. It's a financial center. There is money, and let's build the world's biggest, what became the world's biggest fintech accelerator. And it was an incredible journey. It was a fully bootstrapped company. We never took external money. I started it with an overdraft at the bank of £500, flew over. Hong Kong is an expensive city, so we had to generate cash flow very quickly. We generated cash flow by being a corporate sponsored accelerator. So Standard Chartered, Fidelity, Hong Kong Exchange, Visa, et cetera, were paying us to both run a bit of an innovation marketing element, but also to partner with startups. And that's how we, for example, got to meet with you guys at Genie, because you were a B2B fintech and you were selling your solution into a financial institution, and we're acting as the accelerator, the supercharger factor into that. The accelerator was an incredible experience. It was, I guess, my first very successful company. Successful in terms of the impact that we've done, successful in terms of the value we've created for the founders and the sponsor. Less successful commercially. In hindsight, we should have taken equity in a lot of the companies we worked with, but also less successful personally. The first version of SuperCharger, either as a consequence, as a correlation, really put a lot of pressure on me as a human, which eventually led me to get sick. It's more than a burnout; it's literally getting sick. And then we stopped the company at that stage, and SuperCharger FinTech was no more. But as people tend to say, companies have one life, entrepreneurs have seven. So I decided to then recreate SuperCharger, but this time around with two amazing co-founders, Tamash and Alessandro. So now I'm the co-founder of SuperCharger Ventures. We focus on education, online education, because we believe that the online education opportunity is as big as fintech back in 2015 today. And that's going very well. We have exactly the same ambition if we have not already passed the milestones we've done back in fintech. Today we have 70 portfolio company, whereas it took us 4 years to get 50 in fintech. And one of the excitement and the energy I have with the new SuperCharger is I think I've got to learn myself way better as an entrepreneur, especially on how to manage my well-being and my mental health. And that came because of Founders Taboo, which is my own version of building a support network around me. But because I believe there's many more entrepreneurs that need help and mental health support, we decided that what I would learn from me, we will make it available for other people via our company. which has the ambition to reach every single founder in the world and connect them with the right stakeholder for them to get better. And that's Founders Taboo high level, but I'm sure we'll talk more about it.
Yeah, I really want to talk a lot about Founders Taboo because, mental health for founders is a profound issue. It's very lonely being a founder, but, just to focus on SuperCharger EdTech real quick. I'd really love to learn from your perspective, what is the opportunity in education technology today? Not just on the business side as a fund manager, but for humans around the world.
Look, I think for most people listening, finance now has been, shopping has been totally digitized, right? Advertisement totally digitized, movie totally digitized, finance pretty strongly digitized, right? But education and health is one of those two sectors which are still quite lagging behind in terms of tech adoption. So to give you a perspective, only 2% of education today is digital in the world. And to give you another perspective, about 10% of finance in the world is today digital, 10 to 20, depending on how you look at it. So there's a huge growth, and the amount of money being spent in education is in the trillions a year. Now, it's slow money, right? It's government, schools, universities, corporate L&D, so it's not quick cash. But trend-wise, it's evident. And COVID-19 became a catalyst in that transformation because online education became a necessity. People had to move online in order to maintain knowledge. But I think that now that COVID is mostly gone in most part of the world, people are going back offline. But I think they've realized that online had benefits. It had benefit of cost, it had benefit of efficiency, but also it had benefit of data. Because now suddenly when you have students in a classroom, you can monitor the activity at the individual granular level, which you can't really do in a classroom. Now suddenly you have better insight, and better insight is better teaching, and better teaching is better learning, and better learning is better contributors to society, and better contributors to society is better economic growth, right? But you have another trend, if you look at it, which is, we're about to enter, an inflation, recession, stagflation. The point is, it's not the best economic climate we've ever been in a long time. And what happens when it's not a good economic climate? Governments cut on education budget, and they cut on health. And how do you deliver the same amount of value with 10 times less cost? You use technology, right? So I think the big trend of online education is going to be there. It will allow, one of the company we have is on virtual reality. It's mind blowing what you have on virtual reality. But if you're a kid in El Salvador and, you've only seen the Pyramid of Giza on a piece of paper, now you can put a headset on and genuinely you feel like you're in Egypt. And it's incredible. Like it's really such an immersive experience. So I think you're going to have method of education that are going to be much, much, much more digital. And I think it's a great thing because if you think about the value of data on any sector, and if I give one more example, we have one of a company called Sense Education. And essentially what they say is like education is and teaching is one of the very few things where course don't get updated on the real-time feedback of students and their experience. It maybe gets updated once a decade by the professor. Now we can do that. And we can tell the professor where to update because where the students make the most mistakes in order for the students to have a better experience, but for the next students to improve, right? So that's why I think it's a very exciting space. It's also a very exciting space because a lot of founders in EdTech, they're not as sophisticated and trialed as the one in fintech. So there's a lot of things they know they don't know, and they want to learn. And I think here as an accelerator, we both play a role as a supercharger of their business goals, but also as almost coaches on, okay, so here are the rules of thumbs when you build a company, whether it was in EdTech or in fintech, but they don't know that yet. So yeah, that's the excitement, and I think that's the market ahead of us.
Now you've mentioned, a lot of examples of ed tech encompassing things like virtual reality and new technologies and Zoom and whatnot. But one thing that I always think about is there an opportunity for technology to revitalize education in lower income countries in the same way that like
Yeah.
financial technology has made and mobile phones have made finance in developing countries a lot more accessible and a lot more prevalent. Is that something that we see in edtech as well, or is it still like kind of a more high income country
Mm,
kind of thing?
yeah, no, I think it's a good point. I think that there's really two big pieces to this, right? The first piece is low income families that already have access to education can now get much more value for what they do by using technology, right? So here is you enhance the experience of people that already are in the low tier but now have education. So let me give you an example. We I think what the average salary in El Salvador is $500 a month, right? A trip to Egypt and to see the pyramid would cost 3 months of salary for a kid, right? And now suddenly, by sending $100 VR headset in a school in El Salvador, you can literally share that headset across 20 students. That five bucks a student. And I'm not joking. Is it like you genuinely feel you're almost in Egypt? And so here, people that have education but would never have access to maybe that immersive education or those field trips, which are great, now can have access to it, right? And so this is really this idea of virtual reality, doing things differently, immersion. And then you have another piece, which is the piece around how do you reach people that never got education in the first place, right? And I think here the technology is ready, but the problem is in the infrastructure, right? So um, how can you online education without internet is a non-starter. Online education without a tablet is a non-starter. Online education without a phone is a non-starter, right? And so you need things like 4G networks or sometimes 5G network. So let's say you do an online course. So if you do assignment, you could do 4G, right? Or 3G maybe. But if you do an online course, you need 5G, like video. But then you have another thing, which is, okay, but who pays for the cost of the internet? So because now I'm consuming a MOOC, a massive online course, but that data cost is going to be high. And maybe I don't have $6 a month in data thing. And so then you have companies which are very interesting. So what they do is they try to bring education by not changing the behavior of the kids. So a lot of people have dumb phones, so not quite smartphones, but dumb phones. A lot of people have WhatsApp because WhatsApp actually is often subsidized by Facebook in low income country, right? So the cost of using WhatsApp is free. And so what an amazing startup out of South Africa is doing, which I think is fascinating, and we wanted to shortlist them, we didn't get them, and they just raised 2 million. And really big congratulations to them is they're hacking the WhatsApp telco subsidy to push you online learning content, and then they bolt on a chatbot for you to learn. And so that way, if you go, I want to learn, and everything goes through the WhatsApp. So they pull the internet, and WhatsApp becomes your interface. So that way, if you want to consume a Wikipedia page on, what is fintech or what is democracy, if you go on Wikipedia, this is an internet connection that transfers data that you need to pay for. But if you ask on WhatsApp and WhatsApp pulls the data and brings it to you in the form of a chatbot, in the form of text, now you don't pay for that consumption of knowledge. And I think that's fascinating. And I think those things are going to be hacking the system around that. But I think low income country, it's really a question of, unfortunately, low income by definition, affordability. And online education is data rich. I mean, back in fintech, I used to say Revolut is incredible, but Revolut, the app, is 600 megabyte just to download it. And that could be your monthly budget for cash, especially in low income countries where internet is actually quite expensive. So that's where we are on that side.
Very interesting. And in your career of helping startups, I'm sure you've seen a lot of trials and struggles, but you yourself have been building, essentially a startup as well.
Yeah.
And you've done two supercharger iterations, a fintech and a ed tech. In your, career in this accelerator field, what have been your biggest trials and struggles?
I mean, you say career, but it almost was random and luck and grit and mistakes, right? Too. I mean, I don't think you wake up saying I want to be an entrepreneur as a career. I think you stumble into entrepreneurship either because you really want to capture an opportunity, or either because you need to make money for yourself or your parents, whatever. But what I'm getting at is, you know, when you start entrepreneurship, you don't necessarily think it's a career. You think, and then you make it a career because you learn more and more and more. But just to go this. Look, I think on the what I've learned doing the first supercharger, and I know for a lot of people listening, because entrepreneurship or because you've been entrepreneurs yourself, and also for the people which are not entrepreneurs, some of the things I'll say will sound maybe like platitudes, but I'll try to to substantiate every point. I think first, there's no doubt entrepreneurship makes you humble. Um, I, I thought entrepreneurship was about big ego, and certain people have big ego to drive companies, and it's okay. But fundamentally, the reason why you need a team and the reason why team is so important is because entrepreneurship and building a company makes you realize is that you may be good at certain things, but you're really bad at many, many things. And the reason why it's so evident is because when you do a company, you cannot specialize at the beginning, and you are exposed to the things that you're not good at. Whereas if you join a corporate, you'll do something very specific, and there's a huge amount of network around you, but you know that you don't need to know something else because you've been hired to do one thing, right? And so it makes you humble. The second part, as an extension of humble, is something that a lot of founders have experienced, is imposter syndrome. Is but I'm humble, but like maybe I'm lucky, maybe I shouldn't be there, maybe I don't deserve all of that. And I think the reason why people have imposter syndrome beyond being a syndrome is the fact that at least when you're a first-time entrepreneur, you really don't know what you don't know, and as you keep on growing the business, you keep on facing brand new problems, and those brand new problems, you need to approach them, and you don't know if you have an answer because it's the first time you came across them. So you're always in that uncertainty about yourself because you keep on being thrown things that shows up for the first time. Now, when you're a second-time entrepreneur, you can start seeing patterns. But let's say your first company went all the way to Series A. Well, if you do the second company, I think you'll be like, a happy fish in its fish tank until Series A. And then you're going to arrive on Series B, and you're going to have exactly the same amount of personal doubt and questioning, because you're, again, entering in unknown territory. I think that I've learned another entrepreneur, a guy called Patrick, said, you always meet people twice in your life. And I didn't fully understand that at the time. And so, I did burn bridges with a few people, also because I think sometimes certain people didn't deserve it and it was a waste of time, but certain other people, it was not them, it was, I wasn't seeing just clearly. And I think when you're in pain, when you build your first company, because you're always in pain, you're surviving, right? You start to mono focus on certain things, and you kick people out of your life that you shouldn't. And it's not that they're wrong, it's just that you see things totally differently, right? And I think you need to have that openness of understanding it. And then culture. I think culture is a competitive advantage. It's what in a way keeps a team together. And what client sees, right? Because you can't be front facing as a founder all the time. You need your team, and your team is an extension of you. And again, I do think team is a technology. I think if you train well a team, it's like a way to scale yourself through other people. So I think those are the things I've learned. And then last but certainly not least is no one told me how hard entrepreneurship will be psychologically and physically. No one. And this I'm learning it now. But they tell you a lot of reason why startup fail, and they tell you a lot of things on books on what you need to know to build your product, and no one tells you around sleep regularly, eat well, do the gym, talk to founders. Like no one tells you this, and this I've learned the hard way. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those things no one ever tells you. You always see like the glory stories of so and so. They raise this round and they put it online, and there's always a sense of like maybe a little bit of envy, or you're like looking across the street, how come the lawn is growing so well, but mine is not growing so well. But, I mean, it's very lonely, right? There's a lot of like exhaustion that we have to go through in order
But
to achieve our goals.
but beyond the amazing story, even the horror story, no one talks to you about loneliness and thing. They go, horror story, I got fucked by a VC, horror story, a client stopped me, horror story, IT went down, horror story. But no one really tells you horror story. It's exhausting to make a decision at one point. Like you got that email, and that email is as simple as, hey, hey Janos, can I take a holiday tomorrow? No big deal, right? For 99% of people. And sometimes as a founder, you go like, I can't respond. I just can't, right? So I think that level of things people don't say, even on the horror story side. So you're right, which is I think being lonely. The only way I rationalize it, I think, is if you're lonely, sometimes it's also because that's where there's the most value to be created. Like if you're the only one to have seen an opportunity in the market, that's where there's the most money to be made, right? You're a first mover, you've seen something that other people haven't seen, and therefore you're lonely, right? So I get that. But unfortunately, loneliness so loneliness in a decision can be a good signal, but it shouldn't be a consequence of entrepreneurship and a weight on your shoulder, right? It should be, yeah, I'm the first one who was at this idea and I'm willing to take the plunge. But from that moment onward, you shouldn't be lonely anymore. You should have people that love you, people that care for you, people that support you. And you can be lonely in your thoughts, lonely in your idea of being a visionary, right? Because being a visionary, by definition, you see what people don't see. But you shouldn't be lonely in the operation, lonely in your emotion, lonely in your physical health, lonely in all of that. It's and this I think people really don't talk about, and it's a shame because one of the other things that I've realized being a founder, at one point, a lot of it is about operation, and at one point, a lot of things is about thinking and delegation. And thinking and delegation requires such a clear mind. And if you don't have that, you won't communicate well, you won't coordinate well, you won't trust your team, and then it doesn't work because your company, if it's successful, will always out execute you. Like you cannot, as a founder, you may think you can do things 10 times better, but trust me, you cannot do things 10 times better than your team. If you have 10 team members, one founder is not equal to 10 people. And if one founder is equal to 10 people, fire your team because you're doing a shit job at training them. Like 2 of your staff should be as good as you, or 1 of your staff. But so when founders say, I can do the job of 10 people, said you're really doing a shit job at hiring, and you're doing a shit job at upskilling. And once you understand that, then you realize the power of delegation for yourself, but for the company as well.
Yeah, I mean, like there's so much to unpack there. I mean, like as a founder, in terms of loneliness, I myself feel very lucky that I have a co-founder, right? But one of the biggest benefits is not just the sense of like feeling physically lonely or I'm on my own in this situation, but just having someone to help me stay focused and stay the course on the plan, right? Like I know some founders who are full of energy, but they every week is a new idea, every week is a new kind of plan, and there's not a lot of focus. And it's exhausting for them, right? And I know that they want to focus, but there's a lot of self-doubt as well, right? And a lot of apprehension about whether the decision they made is right. And I wonder how you would look at that for sole founders. Like, how should they kind of approach the focus towards an individual goal if they have no one to kind of bounce ideas off of? Or is
I
it a
mean,
matter of bringing your senior people in, and they might not be a co-founder, but really trusting more of the people on your team?
so I like the first supercharger was I was a solo founder. I mean, I had an incredible partner that really supported me, and I had some amazing professor, Douglas and Ross, that also supported me, and I had a great team, right? But so it was. I think it's a bit unfair to say that I was a solo founder, because those people, whether it was Ina that whether it was Douglas and Ross, or whether it was the team, they didn't want me to be alone, right? But I was not sufficiently intelligent to let them in, or at least to be able to tell them in my words, using their understanding of how not to be alone, right? So I've burned bridges and isolated myself. Now, the reason why I'm starting with this is I know a lot of solo founders, but if anything, all those solo founders on their pitch deck, they always have advisors. I haven't seen a pitch deck in the last 10 years with not an advisory board. Now, granted, sometimes this advisory board is just for the show, right? And they never talk to those people, and maybe those people don't even know they're on the deck. But what I'm getting at is, if you're a solo founder, talk to your advisory board at the very least. So that's what I'm getting at, right? Which is, co-founder is not an answer for everything. And I think that bringing a co-founder just because you want to share to be better, I think it's not justification. You want to bring a co-founder because they bring an expertise that you don't have, beyond sharing the weight of decision across, right? So new SuperCharger, 3 co-founders, and I'm super thankful. Like, it's worth everything. Like, Tamash focuses on the investment side, something that I get, but I'm not as good as he is at. Alessandro, he focused on the partnership side. Again, something that I get, but I'm not as good at. And then finally, you have the whole notion around, how do we approach a problem? And then we break it up, and then, or how do we split a decision? So this is not to say that when you don't have co-founders, having co-founders just remove every tension. Because you start having a co-founder, you start having tension that don't exist when you don't have co-founders. For example, decision-making is now shared. But if you're a self-starter, that's a new tension, right? But the pros for having co-founders is way higher than the cons. And therefore, going back on the solo founder side, I think use your advisory board, and have someone to talk to on this, or join other founders group. But I guess my point is, use your advisory board, even if it's not for your mental health. Like, you have people in your deck. Well, first of all, if you gave them equity, or even if you didn't give them equity and you're considering it, at least have quarterly call with your board. And I can guarantee you, no one is, not no one, but like 80% of early stage founders, they don't do quarterly call with their board. They don't. And that's a mistake. Because one of the things that I also got to learn is, when you're a solo founder and someone goes to you and say, "Hey, Janos, can we do this?" The buck stops with you. And when you're in that position where you have to make a decision, and the other person knows that you're the only person that can make a decision, that decision becomes exhausting because it has a consequence. And it's such an amazing answer to be able to say, "Let me check with my co-founder, I'll get back to you," or "Let me check with my board." Because suddenly it reveals you from the pressure of, so are we doing it or not? Right? And that's not easy. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's all about the pressure, right? Everyone's like under pressure. How can you release a little steam? And we've been talking a lot about stress and the mental difficulties of running a startup. And I guess that brings us to the Founders Taboo. This is an organization that you've founded recently, and it's been growing. And I've participated in some of the sessions, and I think it's really cool. But I'd love to hear from your words a little bit more about what is Founders Taboo, and how did you decide to start it?
Yeah, absolutely. So what is Founders Taboo? So Founders Taboo is a marketplace for founders' well-being and leadership. So we connect founders with resources or individuals that can support them on that. So you need a leadership coach, you go on Founders Taboo, you'll find it. You need someone that helps you with your depression, you go on Founders Taboo, you'll find an online course, a book, or a peer group. So it's a marketplace, right? And that's the vision of it. The reason why it's a marketplace, it becomes from why we started Founders Taboo and who started Founders Taboo. So Founders Taboo is part of SuperCharger, right? So it's a SuperCharger Ventures company that operates independently because we want to grow it as a separate entity, because Founders Taboo is bigger than just edtech. It's any founders, right? But Founders Taboo has been started by myself, but also someone called Annabelle at Founders Taboo. I'm not a psychologist, I'm a founder. Annabelle is not a psychologist, she has a psychology degree. So I think we realize we're not comfortable, us on our side, to be the one providing the care for the founder. We can provide guidance, we can provide signposting, we can provide awareness, we can provide marketing. But the ultimate outcome still should rest with professional people that have 10, 20, 30 years experience of doing that, right? And so that's a reason why we decided the marketplace approach. And also we think it's fundamentally, it's more scalable. And we want the ecosystem to be growing. If I add on one more question that you had, which is, why did we start creating Founders Taboo? It comes from, at the end of the first SuperCharger, the first SuperCharger ended because I got sick. I was in a hospital for a while. And as I got sick, I suddenly wasn't able to be an entrepreneur anymore. I was a patient in a hospital bed, which superpowers had been taken away. I couldn't go on calls. I couldn't do emails. I couldn't even manage my time. Like, doctors were pulling me at random times to run checks on me, right? So I couldn't even schedule anything. So suddenly my whole self-independent, self-starter, and I'll do what I want, I became dependent. And then I got scared that I couldn't be a founder anymore, right? I felt like, can I even do it? And I think that fear of, do I know how to ever ride a bike again, has been there. And then I kind of hid it. I kind of put it under a rug, right? And it kept on coming. I could see that I was off. I would see I was imbalanced. And then I started the new SuperCharger. And then, it's a bit like PTSD. Like, the thing hits me like a rock. It's like, you're going to do a new company. Just to be clear, here's what's going to happen to you. Right? And then I got really, really scared. And I get scared to the point that I needed help. And what do? I go through the NHS, which is, I live in the UK, in London. It's the national health system in the UK. And it doesn't work. Waiting time, 6-9 months. And now end of care for me, February 2024. It doesn't align with a timeline of a founder. Like, time and speed is critical in everything. And so by the time I did my first therapy session with the NHS, Founders Taboo was up and running, 6 months, a staff hired, and we already had 20 hours of content for founders. So Founders Taboo is just a better, faster, more visible, executed support network for founders and their mental health and their leadership. But because we're not psychologists, we decided to be a marketplace. And we will connect the single best resources with the founders, and then for the founders to choose the providers they wish for their condition or their goal that they want to reach. So Founders Taboo can also solve a pain, but also can allow you to reach a goal. It can reduce your depression for you to be creative without the downside of creativity. in order for you to get a breakthrough idea and, come with a new product approach for your business.
Maybe you can elaborate a little bit about that, right? What are the downsides of creativity?
So it's a good question, and I'll pull an image. I guess maybe you can share it on your side later, but let me find it, because I thought it was interesting. So there was a guy called Michael Freeman, and Michael Freeman was interesting because essentially what he said is that mental health issues can be a consequence or a precondition of entrepreneurship, right? So the short thing is that certain mental health conditions, for example, like bipolar, are associated with very high level of risk taking. And because of that, you might essentially do a company where other people wouldn't do it, right? Because you have that love for changing stuff. Now, and then what he did is there's a series of conditions that if you map them, it can explain certain traits of entrepreneurship. So it's the dark side and the bright side of certain mental health condition and how it maps back to entrepreneurs. So let me get that. I'll try to find you the example. So I'll run through some of them. The work was done by a lady. I'll need to find her name. But I think it was also supported by Michael Freeman's work. So let's take depression, right? So depression on the negative side brings to unproductive rumination, right? You stay in your house and you don't do anything. But also when you're depressed, you start to be deeply analytical in your thinking, right? You overthink to the point of like cracking something. Let's take out ADHD. ADHD, it's impulsivity and distraction on the negative, but on the positive side, it's curiosity and hyper-focus. When you just have that ADHD high, you just like out-execute everyone around you. Addiction, it's distress, it's a disease, right? But it's also novelty, sensation, and risk, which can be a drive that you want. And actually, I've got to catch myself. I was addicted at one point on closing deals. I was getting so high the moment I would announce it, and then the next day I was depressed. I was like lacking it, and it was very clear that I had those highs when I was announcing something. Then after this, I go way low because I'm missing that adrenaline. Bipolar, unstable mood, and unstable mood and energy, but it's also productivity and creativity. Burnout, it's obsessive passion, but therefore it's also productive passion. You will work yourself to death to reach a goal, right? But you could just work yourself not to death to reach a goal, right? And I think that's one. And then the last one is, for example, stress-related illness. And so stress creates overwhelming sensations. But also when you know your stress, you become incredibly self-aware about your condition, which is very useful. So I think those are elements that you can take a look at from medical condition to entrepreneurial trait. And then you have another level of reading, and that other level of reading I recently came across, and that was done by a team of people, and the initiative is called Abroad, Abroad.io, I believe. And here what they start doing is they start mapping mental health condition with leadership outcome for founders. And so again, I'll give a bit of an example, but essentially the idea around, for example, I'll try to grab something. I'm literally going on their website because I think it was great. But if you think about bad time management leads to essentially a stress, but bad time management also means that you have a poor team cohesion, and therefore you cannot be more productive as a company, and therefore you're not reaching your goal. So what you may then do in reverse is that certain leadership traits of yourself, coordination, communication, vision, impact, those elements, if you want to improve them, you may need to solve a mental health issue in order to unlock it. So I'll give one last example. sometimes certain founders, and you, Victor, you may know it as well, right? But sometimes the moment you get venture backed, you start losing passion for your company because you need to start delivering not just on your vision, but on financial objective, which might be totally away from that. And therefore, if you're not still fully aligned with the vision of what you want to achieve with the investors that you have, you start to have a disconnection between the amount of effort you put in and the amount of effort you want to put in. And as a founder, it's horrible because as a founder, you go, look, I don't mind not being paid, but I do mind not feeling I'm making the impact I want to do. And that therefore create what? Depression. So you can see how there is a business outcome, a leadership outcome, and a mental health outcome. And actually the whole complexity, I think, around the topic of mental health for founder is you need to speak the psychologist language. You need to speak the company CEO language, is, company performance. And you need to speak the founder language, which is leadership coaching. And you need to map the interrelation between all of that. And that piece of work, we've actually done it now. So yeah.
Normally, when I end these interviews, I always ask the question, what would you do differently if you had to start it all over again? But in your case, you have started SuperCharger all over again.
Yeah.
And so, I'd love to ask you, what is it that you've done differently the second time around, especially as it pertains to not just your mental health, but to making it successful in your own terms, by your definition?
So I guess three things have been done differently. I mean, there's a lot, right? But the first one is the most obvious one, and one that I'm very thankful is solo founder, co-founder. I was alone. I have two great people around me, and I'm learning from them on a regular basis, and I'm thankful for that, right? So that's a big difference. The second one is I am not my company. SuperCharger, even though I was not front-facing at SuperCharger, and I think, in Hong Kong, I was trying to be quite low-key on a few things, but the company's failure and the company's success was intimately linked to my self-worth. And today is not the case anymore. Like, I like the challenge of the new SuperCharger, and I like the challenge of being successful, but I am not my company. And I don't let other people make me think that I'm my company, right? So I try to have a personality and an identity beyond SuperCharger. And then the third one is I got to understand that if I want to be that 10 times better founder, which I always want to be and I always try to improve, I need to work on myself. I need to invest in myself. In the same way that, when you build a product, you have the product sprint, you have the improvement sessions, you have the focus. Like, you need to put the same amount of effort building yourself up than building your company, especially at the beginning. And one of the whole reason I'm putting so much effort onto my psychology and my physical health, and I'm slowly getting there, is because remember when we started the beginning of the workshop, of the webinar, and we talked about founders, they don't know what they don't know, and they always get challenged on things that they've never done. SuperCharger, we're closing our seed round, and we already targeting Series A, and I've never done a Series A, and I want to be the single best version of Janos when I'm going to be faced with a challenge that I've never had. Because if it's a challenge that I've never had and I cannot think straight, I'll do a disservice to my co-founder, I'll do a disservice to my team, I'll do a disservice to our investors. And that Series A should be happening next year, and I have 1 year to get my body and my mind ready to start answering questions that I've never been asked and being able to report back metrics that I've never had to do. And that's something that is very different. I'm incredibly self-aware about that. And I know I have the answers in my head, but I've never given myself the potential to find those answers in a calm way, as opposed to in a very chaotic, productive way.
Thank you very much, Janos, for coming on the show today. How can people learn more about SuperCharger or Founders Taboo?
Yeah, so look, the best place is always online, right? So SuperCharger, we have a website. If you're an tech company that wants to accelerate your growth, please apply, reach out to us. If you're a mentor or if you're an investor that wants to invest in tech companies or work with tech companies, again, please reach out. It's all self-served. On Founders Taboo, either go on the website again. We're currently in private beta. We'll be releasing a series of content for people to be able to consume before making it available to the public. Or you may also try to reach out on LinkedIn, either myself, which is always a hit and miss, or someone called Annabelle Cameron at Founders Taboo. And Annabelle has been the face, the brain, the hands of that initiative, which is now a company. And so feel free to reach out to her equally as to me, because she has as much impact, if not even more, than me on a lot of things. So there you go.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Victor, and be well as well for you.
Thanks.